There are a bunch of products that I have mentioned on the channel that I might have mentioned when I got like a first look at it. Like the one that made me think to do this video was this Aomway antenna. When I first got the antenna, I did a sort of a first look at it, and I thought I should go back now that I've flown with it for a while and like give a second look. And I realized there are a whole bunch of products that I have mentioned on the channel that might deserve a second look now that I've had a little more time to get used to them and find a little bit more about the ins and outs of them. So that's what this video is going to be. And the first one we're going to do is this Aomway antenna. When I first got this Aomway antenna, the reason I ordered it was because it had this thicker coax here, and the thinner coax I was finding on the cheaper antennas, that was sort of this floppy thin coax, and it was breaking a lot. I broke one antenna 5 minutes after I put it on in a particularly bad crash. And I hoped that this would be more durable. But my concern was that the stiffer coax might be more stressful on the top plate and damage the top plate. So I can say without reservation that this is now my favorite FPV antenna. Now, I don't know. I haven't done like a detailed range check against like a $60 IB Crazy antenna, right? But I'm never going to run a $60 IB Crazy antenna on my racing copter anyway. I don't care if it gives me 50 feet more range. That's not going to happen. And I think for the kind of flying proximity acro and for racing, I think we can afford to sacrifice a little bit of range for a little bit of durability. Now, I will say that I do run this antenna on my copter with a cover on it, and this is the exact cover that I use, and I order it in the, quote, strong and flexible material. I like this material a lot. It is, I didn't actually used to know that you could even 3D print in a material like this. It is, well, it's flexible. It's kind of like, it's not a rigid plastic like maybe an ABS. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's Ninja Flex. I don't know. I'm not really big in 3D printing. And the great thing is that I take this cap and I just use a little bit of hot glue around the edges and right here around the coax. And then if something does happen to the antenna and it gets trashed, I just put this, I put it under a hair dryer or a hot air gun, or I even just put it in the toaster oven on the warm cycle. The glue softens up. I pull it off again, clean off the glue. I've reused this same cap on like 5 different antennas as the antennas have broke for one reason or another. If you order it from Shapeways, it is pretty expensive. If you have a 3D printer, of course, you can make your own, depending on what you're set up to do. But even if you were to pay 10 bucks for this, I almost think it would be worth it because my antennas last way longer than the other guys at my flight club who don't fly with covers on their antennas. Their antennas are constantly getting trashed and mine aren't. So I heartily recommend this. I would say that if you are flying maybe like a QAV top plate with that little nub sticking out for the antenna, this may not be the best choice for you because it's going to be more likely to break off. On the other hand, if you do like a lot of people are doing now, where you have the antenna just sticking straight out the back of the copter, heartily recommend this. The coax is thick enough and stiff enough that it will hold its shape pretty well. But I've crashed the dickens out of it and it's gotten bent up a bunch of times. And I've very, very carefully been inspecting it for cracks or nicks or any place where it might be being compromised, and it just hasn't happened. So I feel like this is well worth paying 15, 16 bucks for two, as opposed to paying, whatever, the 10 bucks for two, like 5 bucks a piece. There's like 8 bucks a piece versus 5 bucks a piece for the cheaper ones. I feel like this is a very, very good value for money in your antenna. Okay, what about these KingKong 6040 props? When I first reviewed these props, I was flying on 3S. Oh, so long ago. And I didn't like them. I didn't like them on 3S. I compared them to HQ6045, and I found them to be a little bit soft. Basically, in flight, I didn't feel like they had the responsiveness and the thrust that I wanted. And I have since gone to 4S, and I have flown these props on 4S. And I can say that on 4S, I feel like they're good enough. Are they as good as the HQ6045s? No, the HQ6045s are stiffer and they make more thrust and they fly better. But they are freaking expensive. They're like $2 a pop and they break like they just break constantly. Ever since I went to the KingKong props and the Dowell props, I have really enjoyed being able to crash into a branch while I'm flying and not just drop out of the air instantly, but just keep flying. And also not spend $2 every time I crash. Minimum $2, $4, eight, maybe $8 a pop if I break all my props. So I would say that if you're on 3S and you're very budget minded and you're not super performance minded, these would be an okay choice. But I felt like at the point where I was in my piloting that I wanted to get as much as I could get out of 3S. Like 3S was barely enough, but I wasn't quite ready to commit to 4S yet because of the financial aspect of it. And so I felt like these were not enough. But if you are not at that point where you need to just get absolute most amount of thrust and performance out of 3S, these would be a fine choice. And if you're flying 4S, these are a fine choice and way, way more economical to fly than like HQ props. All right. What about these KingKong 5040s? I tell you what, I know that 5040 is not a sexy prop, right? 5040 is only slightly less boring than 5030. It's not a tri-blade, it's not a bullnose. These props are my favorite props to fly, period, so far. They have adequate thrust. Even given that my copter has a 650 or 700 gram, depending on which battery I'm running, all up weight, the fact that I say they have adequate thrust probably means that on a more reasonably weighted copter, they would have plenty of thrust. They're very responsive, very smooth response, very quick response, very controllable. I like these props a lot. And I also love the fact, I love where they are in the durability curve. And what I mean by that is like the Dowell props are super durable, and what that means is that they'll take a hit, the prop will get bent, it will show no obvious visible sign of damage, and you'll go to fly and suddenly there's a lot of vibration, your camera looks like crap, and you have to land, and then you have to kind of go over your whole copter with a microscope trying to see which prop is just slightly bent and is throwing you off. And then the good thing about the Dowell props is if you can bend it back, a lot of times you can get back in the air and be okay, and that's nice. But I really like with these, I can't tell you how many times I've landed with these props and there's like a nick taken out of the tip of one from where I hit a branch. And I'm just like, I go back up and I fly it again. And maybe it sounds a little bit, there's like a little bit of a hum while I'm flying, but other than that, I just can't tell. I have beat the dickens out of these props and just put them right back up in the air. And they just keep flying. They fly good under a wide variety of conditions, and then eventually they do break. And that's the other thing about the Dowell props. They're so tough that in a strong hit, depending on what motor you've got, they could damage your motor. And frankly, I'd rather the prop take the hit than the motor. So these KingKongs, I feel like, they fly well even when they're a little bit banged up. And in a bad crash, they do break, and that's kind of what I want. So I wish that KingKong made a tri-blade so I could try that, because I feel like there's some benefit to going to tri-blades. But for the time being, like on my next build, I've got some 2633 kV motors coming, and the specific reason I picked those motors was that I think they're going to fly really well on these props. Whereas a lower kV motor, you may need a tri-blade or a bullnose to get the most performance out of it. And I don't like the, I'll talk about tri-blades in a minute. Here is the T5045BN bullnose props. Now, it's unfortunate. These are Dowell props, and there are 3 different styles of Dowell tri-blade props. There is a sort of square-tipped bullnose, which is this one. There is a regular profile, 5045, and then there is a sort of an intermediate bullnose, which I haven't actually flown, so that's not included here. So you pay very, very close attention to what you're ordering when you go to order and make sure you're getting the one you want, because it's a little confusing. But this is a square tip bullnose. I like this prop a lot. I do. However, I can't get over the fact that this square tip is horribly, horribly, horribly inefficient. Now, I haven't put this prop on a thrust stand, but I have tested, for example, the HQ style square tip bullnose, and it's just terrible efficiency at the top end. So, and now it makes more thrust. And if you need the absolute maximum thrust and you have all the current in the world to throw at your motors, and you don't mind that your flight times will be short, this would be a good choice. This is a good prop. I think it handles well, it flies well. You may recall I didn't like the way that the Gemfan 5045 bullnose handled. So no matter how much thrust it makes on the bench, it doesn't matter if it doesn't corner like I expect it to, and if I can't hold altitude with it. I didn't have any of those problems with these props, so I like these props, but I feel like they are pretty inefficient, and they would not be my favorite prop, and I would not sort of run them as my daily prop. Also, they have the same problem that I have with all of the Dowell tri-blades, which is that they're super durable, but they're also super fragile at the same time. So you'll crash into a tree or something, you'll crash into a branch, and you'll go pick up your copter, and the props look fine, but one of them is slightly bent, and you have to kind of go over the whole thing with a microscope after every one to see if one of them's bent. And if you're lucky, you can bend it back and you can keep flying. But I don't actually find that I save a lot of money with these ultra durable tri-blades, because the second they take the least bit of damage, they're so out of balance that you can't fly with them. Well, you can. It just looks like it looks like you're in an earthquake. So I have mixed feelings about these tri-blades. They perform really well, and they're durable in that they don't shatter like the HQs, right? My friend who flies HQ tri-blades, he finishes every day with a pile of broken props. And when I fly these Dowell props, I finish every day with a pile of props that look pristine but are so knocked out of balance you can't fly them. So I'm not sure who's ahead, really. Anyway, I almost would rather have the prop just break, and then I know it's broken, I can replace it. I don't know. At least you could fly back. You don't have to go out, walk, and get it if the prop is out of balance but still flyable. Anyway, this is, I just got a set of these and have flown a few batteries on them, and so far I like them very much. I feel like for me, this is a great tri-blade where I'm not taking the efficiency hit of a bullnose, or especially a square tip bullnose, but I'm still getting the extra thrust and control of a tri-blade. They handle really well. They are very responsive. I like them a lot. I still have the same complaints about durability in terms of, getting knocked out of balance very easily. But if I were to pick a tri-blade, this would probably be my go-to. Now, why wouldn't I fly something like the very, very popular HQ5 by 4x3, right? And the answer is those first two letters in the name, HQ. These guys are $3 for a set of 4, and the HQ are, I think they're at least twice that. I don't know. I'm not looking at it right now. And so I just, I don't care how much better the HQ perform if at the end of the day I can't afford to fly them and I'm scared of crashing because they're so expensive. I'd rather spend my money on other things. So far I'm liking these a lot, although I still would rather have the simplicity and the robustness of a two-blade situation where it doesn't get knocked out of balance quite so easily. And that's what I'm hoping to get out of this 2633 kV motor. I would not run these props on a 2633 kV motor. I feel like a tri-blade is probably going to overprop that motor, almost maybe like a 5030 by 3, if that even exists. Maybe a 5040 by 3. Probably not, though. Like that's going to overprop the motor. So this is the camera that I'm using. Now, many of you out there are going, yeah, obviously, it's the 1177. That's the camera to use. A lot of people have figured that out. Some people out there are still running board cameras, and I'm not telling you should throw your board cameras in the trash, but I am saying that the next camera you buy should probably be this camera, in my opinion. It's a decent price. I don't see the point of spending $70 on some name brand camera when you can get this one or one like it. The picture is just fine. I really like the fact that at least from Surveil Zone, you can order it with both the top and the bottom connector. I always order mine with the top connector, so when you tilt the camera back, the connector is not bumping against the bottom plate. I feel like that's really nice. You didn't used to be able to do that. You can order it with your choice of lenses and either IR sensitive or IR block. I order mine IR sensitive. I feel like accepting a little bit reduction in sort of color fidelity during the daytime is worth getting the much better light sensitivity in the sort of twilight hours. I'm able to keep flying when the sun is sort of almost even below the horizon, and I can get a couple more batteries in if I want to, because the camera. In fact, many times I take off my goggles after flying, and I'm kind of amazed at how dark it is because I've been looking through the camera and it's so sensitive. So I like that a lot. This camera is so easy to mount. Now, of course, frames like the QAV210 and the Race Blade and other frames like that have the built-in mounting for these screws. These screws are really clever how they've done this on this camera. I have an older version, the 1171. It's got a metal case, and the screws, you have to actually Loctite them in or they'll back out. It's just regular screw threads. This camera has a kind of a stiff, maybe plastic or nylon insert in the screws, in the screw sort of receptacle, so that when you put the screw in, it fits in really tightly and it won't back out. So it's almost like a built-in nylock system. And that's really nice because you can put the screw in. You don't have to screw it in all the way tight. You can just put it in a little loose to let the camera have some adjustability, and the screw won't back out. You don't have to Loctite it. The other thing that's really nice about this is this metal bracket. The 1171 camera came with a slit cut here, which seems like a good thing because the camera can be adjusted up and down, but it's really a bad thing because the camera is constantly slipping up and down and changing its angle, and it's a real pain in the butt to get it to mount such that that doesn't happen. So with this one, you just put the screws in the middle hole, and then the camera will stay where it is, and then you just set your angle, and boom, you're good to go. So this is the camera I'm just putting in all my copters. Oh, hey, another feature this camera has that is really great is it has the ability to put your call sign or your pilot name on the screen via the camera's OSD menu, which is nice because a lot of OSDs, like the RROSD, don't have the ability to put your call sign in, and especially in a FPV meet, it can be really nice to see whose camera you're looking at. You could see if you're looking at your own camera and not get confused. And also, technically, if you want to get down to it, the FCC does require that you broadcast your call sign once every 10 minutes and at the end of transaction, and the end of transmission, rather. And the easiest way to do that is just put your call sign on screen all the time. So that's a good thing, a very nice feature. I like this camera a lot. What about my HD cam? The Xiaomi Yi is my go-to. Now, some of you out there are flying a Runcam HD2 or maybe a Foxeer Legend, and those are good cameras. And in fact, I haven't flown those cameras, so maybe they're better. I don't know, but I've flown the Xiaomi Yi, and I'll tell you what I like about it a lot. The number one thing I like about it is that you can get this Superview script. It can actually load this script off your SD card when the camera powers up. And this script, the big thing it does is it lets you have bit rate up to 35 megabits per second. I think the default bit rate is, I think it's around like 18. Don't quote me on that, but it can go up to 35 megabits per second. It could go faster if the SD card could keep up, but it can't usually. So, and it also tweaks the sharpness and does a couple other tweaks to the image that makes the image look so good. So good. It looks so good. So people say, oh yeah, well the Xiaomi Yi, it's only like $80 and that's good, but it doesn't look as good as a GoPro. And out of the box, you're right, it doesn't. But with this script, does it look as good as a GoPro? Maybe not quite, but boy, it starts getting close, and it is way cheaper. I know which one of these I want to crash into a car park floor 100 times. Speaking of crashing into the floor, I've been really impressed with the durability of this camera. I have crashed it many, many times. It has gone flying through the air, tumbling and tumbling, and so far it just hasn't stopped working. So, hey, good. I don't run it in a case or anything like that. It just keeps working. So this is a camera I like a lot. The only reason I would sort of go a different direction is if for some reason you really need the sort of flat candy bar form factor, like the Runcam or the Foxeer Legend, you know, you don't like the sort of upright form factor, the GoPro style form factor, then you might go that direction. But the ability to bump the bit rate up to 35 megabits per second is so huge in terms of video quality. Just that's such a big game changer and very, very worth it. All right, that is it. That is the stuff I thought I would show you, and I hope that's all interesting, helpful. If you have other opinions, other gear that you think I should be paying attention to or that other people should know about, or if you just think I've completely got it wrong, no, that's the wrong camera, buy this one instead, put it in the comments. I always like to learn more stuff about more stuff. Happy flying.